quick recap of what we did so far. Right. So the Mishnah tells us Yoma Kippurim asur ba'achila uv'shtiyah tzar b'sicha v'nilat l'sanah v'tashmish mitah. Right. So Yom Kippur is asur and other things. So the first question that Gemara asked was essentially, why does the Mishnah use the term asur? B'achila and shtiyah. Said that you're chayav for eating or on Yom Kippurim. The way the Gemara puts it is asur, right? Like bitmiya, like wondrous question. All right, eat or drink on Yom Kippur, chayav karet. So why did the Mishnah term it as asur? Asur indicates something lesser. Amar Rabbi Ela, Yutema Rabbi Yirmiyah, lo nila chatzi shiur. So Rabbi Ela says, you don't need the Mishnah to say except to tell me that it's that even a shiur is asur. So the implication that chatzi shiur is asur, but if you eat a chatzi shiur on Yom Kippurim, if you eat a chatzi shiur on Yom Kippurim, you're not great. So it's like the Mishnah is coming to tell me something beyond what I would have thought the most obvious. Most obvious thing is to say, Achila v'shtiyah is a chiyuv karet. So the chidush of the Mishnah is not only are you chayav karet for eating or drinking on Yom Kippur, but even if you eat less than a shiur, that's still asur. Even though there isn't a chiyuv karet. So the Gemara says, okay, hanicha l'mandam rechat shiur asur min Torah. So that answer that the Mishnah then here is actually referring to the isur of eating and drinking a chatzi shiur on Yom Kippur. So that's fine, according to a person who says that chatzi shiur asur min Torah. Excuse me. El mandam chatzi shiur mutar min Torah ma'ikal me'amar. Right, we know, and the Gemara brings this machloket to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, where there's an opinion. Rabbi Yochanan is going to hold that chatzi shiur is asur min Torah, and so for him the Mishnah now reads properly. It reads well. So how does it read well? Because now I understand. There's an isur eating chatzi shiur eating chatzi shiur on Yom Kippur, and that's what the Mishnah tells me. But what if you hold that chatzi shiur is in fact mutar min Torah? So then, according to the Manda Amar, according to the one who says that chatzi shiur is mutar min Torah, then the Mishnah doesn't make sense. In other words, if the idea here of saying asur is to indicate chatzi shiur, that's asur min Torah, so then it's fine. But if you hold that chatzi shiur is mutar min Torah, then I go back to my original kasha. Then why does the Mishnah say asur? So if it's right, if chatzi shiur is mutar min Torah, so then what can asur indicate? It should have said chiyuv karet. So elamanda amar chatzi shiur mutar min Torah ma'ikol me'amar di'itman. So first the Gemara is going to tell us this machloket because we have a ma'amar amoraim. It says Chatzi Shiur Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asur Min Torah, Kisha Mutar Min Torah. That's the basic machlokes. So now we'll read the question using their names. Hanicha Rabbi Yochanan. So our Mishnah goes well according to Rabbi Yochanan because he holds that Chatzi Shiur is Asur Min Torah. El Reish Lakish Ma'yikal Memar. How will Reish Lakish be able to learn our Mishnah when he holds that Chatzi Shiur is Mutar Min Torah? It doesn't say Mutar in the Mishnah. It says Asur. And Asur is a problematic word because if it's talking about a shiur and more, it should have said a chiyuv karet. So the Gemara gives us a straightforward answer. Modeh Rish Lakish Asur Midrabanan. So Rish Lakish acknowledges, he admits that Chatzi Shiur is still Asur Midrabanan. So how did that answer our question? Now that I know that Rabbi Kish holds that Chatzi Shiur is Asur Midrabanan, how does that answer our question?
So if it's Asur and Derabanan, it means that there's a lesser level penalty.
Yeah, but how does it answer? What was our question? What's the answer?
So the question is, why does it say Asur?
Okay.
And answer the question is saying, okay, it may not be. So Asur. So it answers the question by saying, okay, obviously it's correct. It's more than Asur. But if it's the Rabbanan, then there's a lesser level penalty, and therefore the word Asur would apply.
Okay. So that's a better answer. That's a better rounded answer than what you gave initially. So yes. So yes, Rish Lakish can say the reason the Mishnah, in other words, everybody will hold, in other words, everyone will hold, both Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan both hold that the Mishnah is not talking about the chiyuv karet that's associated with eating and drinking on Yom Kippur. Because if that were the case, then the Mishnah would have said, we would have said chayav. So since it says asur, everybody understands that it's not dealing with the isur karet. So Rabbi Yochanan answers by saying, it's talking about chatzi shiur, and the isur is nonetheless an isur midioraita. And Reish Lakish says it's asur, but it's only asur midorabanan, and therefore the term asur is still applicable. It's still the proper term or a proper term to use to indicate that level of isur. So then the Gemara says, okay, so then according to Reish Lakish, eating and drinking on Yom Kippur, a chatzi shiur, right, less than a shiur, that's asur only midrabanan, but not midioraita. That's Reish Lakish's shita. So the Gemara now has another problem. If so, if Reish Lakish holds that if in fact Chatzi Shiur is asur midrabanan and not midioraita, lo nichayev alei korban shvuah, then you should not be chayav a korban shvuah for it, for eating a Chatzi Shiur. So the question, so of course now the Gemara has to introduce this whole issue of the korban shvuah and how it relates to Chatzi Shiur. So here what's being discussed now, what we understand when the Gemara introduces this concept, there's an assumption that the Chatzi Shiur here is not a concept that's limited to Yom Kippur. It's a general concept. It'll apply anytime when you need a minimum shiur for something. That less than a shiur is going to be If there's an isur of eating midioraita, so stam achila always involves a shiur. We touched on this last time. So if I say that let's say I need to eat a certain shiur in order to be obligated to bench, or I need to eat a certain shiur. Okay, so you might say, well, okay, set that aside. But let's say I need to eat a shiur of Korban Pesach or matzah on Leil Pesach in order to be Yotze. So if I eat less than a shiur, I'm not Yotze. And if I eat a shiur of something that I'm forbidden to eat, like something that's treif and nevela, treifa, or tevel, or orla, or anything that the Torah forbids from eating, if I eat less than a shiur, according to Reish Lakish, it's the Torah actually permits you. It's Tarmina Torah. You're allowed to eat less than that shiur, but the Rabbanan were magdir, and they said, nonetheless, you shouldn't do it. And you listen to the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. They don't say specifically anything about Yom Kippur. They just say Chatzi Shiur. Rabbi Yochanan Asur, and Reish Lakish says it's mutar. And so I understand this is a broad concept. So now I'm going to see, does that work? Will this be applicable in other cases? So the case that the Gemara brings is this case of Shavua Shelo Achal. Shelo Ochal. Someone makes a Shavua. He says, I'm going to eat. So let's say it's Monday. He says, I'm not going to eat all Tuesday. We learned last time, if somebody says, I'm not going to eat, period, like ever, that's considered to be a shav, because that's impossible. Nobody can survive without eating. So when it says shvu shelo achal, we understand. So he's not going to eat, let's say, for a certain period of time.
So hunger strike would be considered a Shavuot Shav.
It would it depends.
Like somebody says, okay, I'm going to fast, and I may end up fasting to my death as his hunger strike. That's part of what his hunger strike. So that would not be a Shavuot Shav, presumably, because I think the person who's making that declaration is deadly serious.
Deadly serious. I like that. Possibly, it'll depend on what it would depend. If a person here, wait a second. I don't want to digress on this too much, but
actually, we don't have to go down this avenue.
No, but I understand what you're asking, right? So we saw this last time. The Rambam says in the first parak of Hilchot Shvuot, when he's talking about Shvuot Shav, he says there are four kinds. It breaks down into four categories. Shvuot Shav has four categories. So one of them is Shnishba davar shein koach bo la'asot. Ketzad k'gon shnishba shelo yishan shlosha yamim layla v'yom etzufim. Somebody declares that they're not going to sleep for 72 hours straight. Shelo yitom klum. He won't taste anything. He won't bring any food to his mouth for 7 days straight. So notice he gives it a time. The assumption is that an average person could possibly survive for 7 days without any food. So, like I say, it depends. Depends on the way the person their shvuah. But to go back to our issue here, somebody makes a shvuah that they're not going to eat, but then achal nevelot utrefot shkatzin urunasim. But then he went and he ate things that he's forbidden to eat from the Torah. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat these things. So our question is that considered to be eating? In other words, when he made the shvuah that I'm not going to eat, did he mean I'm not going to eat anything? Or does he mean I'm not going to eat things that I'm normally permitted to eat? So the Tanakhama says chayav. He says you're chayav on shvuat bitui. So what's the shvuat bitui? That was you concentrated on last time. Does anybody remember?
A shvuat bitui is a vow to do something that is not in your power to do.
No, that's a shvuat shab, and that's what we just said.
Okay, now right, of course, yes, excuse me.
That's okay. So I will tell you, I don't know if you had learned anything about shvuot before this. I'm guessing Michael Schwartzman. Yeah. So
shvuah betui is if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, or you did something and said you didn't do it.
Right. Either you're going to do something, or you say you're not going to do something, or you said I did something, or I didn't do something. It also divides into 4. It's not 4 categories, but there's 4 instances. So this would be a classic shvuah bitui, and the word bitui, like we said, it derives from the lashon pasuk, the pasuk that talks about this is it says someone who expresses with their lips lahara o lehitiv, to either make something bad or to make something good. Chazal understood to make something bad or to make something good, they just done broadly to mean to either make a positive statement or a negative statement. So negative would be I will not eat. The positive would be I will eat. And the same thing in the past tense. So somebody says shua shelo ochal, but nonetheless so what's the basic shvuat bitui? It would be a person who made a shvuah I'm not going to eat, and then he ate a pizza, he ate something that's kosher. So then he's chayav a korban for shvuat bitui. That's the chiyuv we're talking about. That's the chiyuv that the Mishnah in Shavuot is interested in. It's not dealing with the fact that he's all chayav, that he might also be chayav for eating something treif. So, like I say, if you start from this simple case, the simple case it says, I won't eat, and then he eats something that he's allowed to eat. So he violated his shvuah. And so now chayav a korban. It's chayav for shvuat bitui. So then the question is, what if he makes a shvuah he's not going to eat, but then he eats something that he wouldn't normally eat? So we saw this in the Mishnah. If he eats things that are not ra'ui to eat, like if he eats brine, or if he eats wood, or he eats things that are not normally considered to be their food, they're not normally consumed. So that's not considered to be a violation of the shvuah, because that's not really eating. The term ochel refers to eating in a conventional sense. Then we come to this question about nevelot u'trefot. So nevelot u'trefot, in fact, are normal food. They're forbidden to, but they are food. They're edible. So the Mishnah says, Shvua shelo ochal, v'yachal neveirot u'treifot shkatzim u'rumasim, chayav. Tanakama holds he's chayav for his korban shvua. He broke his shvua by eating treif. Because after all, it's still food. And he said he wasn't going to eat. Rabbi Shimon Poter. Rabbi Shimon says he's patur from korban shvua. He'll still be chayav for eating neveirot or treifot, but that's a separate issue. But regarding his shvua, he'll be patur. The havinan ba. So then we discuss this. The Gemara now discusses this Mishnah. Amai chayav. According to the Tanakama, says it's chayav. Why should he be chayav? Mushba v'omeid mehar Sinaihu. He's already sworn and standing, right? In other words, he's in a state of having sworn already at Har Sinai that he would not eat these things in particular. And so what's the point? When he made a shvuah, shelo ochal, and then he went ahead and ate things that were treif, the things that he ate that were treif should not have been included in his shvuah, because that was a shvuah he made already when he stood at Sinai. And you can't make a shvuah on top of a shvuah. So since he had already forbidden these things to him at Sinai, the fact that he now makes another shvuah, however many dozens of generations later, he should be patur because the violation of the shvuah that he made was already covered by this prior shvuah that he denied. So he'll be chayav for eating the beirot treifot, but he should be patur from the shvuah, from the korban shvuah. So now, let's go back. The Gemara here is to understand Reish Lakish, right? So Reish Lakish holds Chatzi Shiur is mutar min haTorah. So right now, at this moment, we still haven't gotten to the issue. When we bring this example from the Mishnah and Shvuot, we haven't gotten to the question of Chatzi Shiur. We're building up a case. So the first step is to talk about this Shvuah. We want to understand the Shvuah shelo ochal, when he eats nevelos and treifos, why should he be chayav a korban? After all, he's mishma v'omeid mehar Sinai, and you can't make a shvuah on a shvuah. So Rav Shmuel of Rabbi Yochanan de Amri. So these three Rabbanim, Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, all say the way to understand that Mishnah is b'kolel dvarim hamutarim, dvarim ha'asurim. The way we have to understand the Mishnah that says Shvuah shelo ochal must be when he was more explicit than what the Mishnah tells us, and that when he said, I will not eat, he said explicitly, I'm not going to eat both things that are permitted to me as well as things that are not permitted to me. So we'll give a specific example. So let's say he says, Shvuah shelo ochal basar shachut, right? I'm not going eat kosher, and I'm also not going to eat treif meat. So if he had just made a shvuah that said, I'm not going to eat treif meat, and then he eats treif meat, then actually everybody agrees he would be patur. But if he says, I'm not going to eat kosher meat and I'm not going to eat treif meat, once he added in to the shvuah that I'm not going to eat something that's mutar, so because he's included something that's mutar, so there's a chalut, right? The shvuah has, as it were, something to grab onto, right? So his shvuah is not. There's a part of his shvuah which is completely normal and standard. So the shvuah is going to take hold. There's a shvuah that's going to that will take hold because of the part that's normal in the shvuah. He says, I'm not going to eat things that are mutar for me to eat. And because it takes hold for that part, the shvuah can't be broken up into different parts. So since it takes hold for things that are mutar for him, it will also take hold for things that are sur for him. So in that sense, even though he's mushba v'omeid mehar Sinai, not to eat things that are treif, but now I have something else that can, as it were, ignore that or go past that and say, this shvuah still has validity because of the part that's the normal part of it, the part that says I'm not going to eat things that are mutar. So that's how Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan understand the Mishnah, and that's how they answer the question of Mushva Omeid Sinai. So they say, yes, he is Mushva Omeid Nehar Sinai on not eating things that are treif. So why should he be chayav if he ate things that were treif after he swore he wasn't going to eat them? Because when he made the shvuah, he included things that were mutar. Reish Lakish Amar, Ata motzei el b'mefaresh chatzi shiur v'ali b'derabanan o bistam v'ali b'derabbi Akiva. So what does that mean? So Reish Lakish disagrees with Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. I just want to point out, in case we haven't pointed this out before, but I mentioned many times. So Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan were contemporaries. They were all Talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yochanan remained in Israel and was the Gadol Ador in the generation after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And Rav and Shmuel went to Bavel. They went back to Bavel. And they were the Gedolei Hador in Babel. Very often we will see machlekot between Rav and Shmuel, or between either Rav and Shmuel against Rabbi Yochanan, and generally halacha is going to be like Rabbi Yochanan because the Torah of Eretz Yisrael is superior to the Torah of Chutz La'aretz. But it's just important to point out that here all three of those people agree. Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan all agree that this is how the Mishnah should be understood. And only Reish Lakish dissents. Reish Lakish was a contemporary. He was the famous Talmid Chaver of Rabbi Yochanan. And of course there are dozens of machlekot between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, like we see here. So we know already that Reish Lakish disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan about whether or not Chatzi Shiur is Asur min HaTorah or not. Now he's saying something a little different. Reish Lakish amar, "E'at hamotzei ela b'mfaresh chatzi shiur, ve'aliva d'Rabbanan." So what is he talking about? He's still explaining this Mishnah. So here's our Mishnah. Shvuah shelo achal v'chana ve'elotot shkatzinu nasim chayav. Our question about this Mishnah is, why should he be chayav? He's mushpa v'omeid mehar Sinai. So how can it be that he's chayav? So Reish Lakish says the reason he's chayav, he says you don't find Eyat HaMotzei, you won't find that he's chayav for making such a shvuah ela b'mefaresh chatzi shiur. You only find it when he says explicitly that I will not eat less than a shiur. Now, just about this for a moment. The examples that we brought of achila until now, things that either you have to eat from the Torah or you're not allowed to eat from the Torah. And we said that the basic definition of achila is going to be based on a specific shiur for whatever it is. Maybe it's a kazayit. In the case of eating on Yom Kippur, we already know it's kakotevet hakasa and so forth. And if you eat less than that, everybody holds if you eat less than that, then either you're not chav d'oraita, or maybe it's even, according to Reish Lakish, maybe it's mutar min Torah, but it's asur midrabanan. But you need a shiur. So it seems like shiur is something that you always have to have. But when you come to the question of making a shvuah, I'm going to make a shvuah that I'm not going to eat. We introduce now an idea that this could be different. In other words, here it could be that there's no minimum shiur, because if somebody says, I'm not going to eat at all, if he says, I'm not going to eat, so then we might assume what he means is, I'm not going to eat a shiur, because stam achila is a shiur. But if he says, I'm not going to eat at all, I'm not going to eat even a tiny bit, so the nature of the mechanism of shvuah is that he can make that asur for himself. He can make it asur for him to eat less than a shiur. This is how Reish Lakish wants to understand the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says shvuah shelo ochal, he says it must be that when he made the shvuah, he said, I'm not going to eat even a chatzi shiur. V'aliba d'Rabbanan, and holding like the way the Rabbanan hold. There's a machloket in the Mishnah between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Akiva, and I don't remember if we saw this last time or not, but hold on a second. Excuse me. I'm also very tired. I also, for some reason, did not sleep well last night. I don't know why. Just a sec. Let's look at this Mishnah here for a moment. This is the first Mishnah in Gimel, in Shavuot. So Mishnah says Shavuot Shtayim Shehein Arba. Shavuot, there are two Shavuot which become four. And we'll see, the Mishnah here is talking about Shavuot Bitui. That's two, right? That's lahara ulahitiv. Shachalti v'shelo achalti, right? And that's the extra two that make it four. So lahara leitiv is in the future, and that's mifurash in the pasuk. And the past tense is not mifurash in the pasuk, but as we'll see, we learned that out. And we'll learn out from drasha that it will apply also to making a shvua about things that have already happened. So that's the shtayim shehem arba. So that Mishnah says, shelo ochal, v'yachal kol shehu, chayav. Someone makes a shvua and he says, I'm not going to eat. That was the language they used. It says, ani lo ochal, and it's a shvua sheni lo ochal. But achal kol shehu, and then he ate the tiniest amount, right? In other words, he ate any amount less than a shiur. Chayav. He'll be chayav for what bitui, divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva holds, if you stam make a shvua to not eat, that will include even a chatzi shiur. Rabbi Akiva. So other chayim said to Rabbi Akiva, "Echan matzinu ba'ochel kol shehu chayav shezeh chayav." So they say to Rabbi Akiva, where else do we see a case of somebody who eats less than a shiur, something they're not allowed to eat, would be chayav, that I could say that it's comparable here. In other words, just like what we were talking about a moment ago. Wherever the Torah says you're not allowed to eat, it's understood that there's a minimum shiur that you have to eat in order to be chayav. So he's saying to Rabbi Akiva, what do you mean he's chayav v'kol shu? Why? Where do I ever see that someone who eats something that's forbidden to them would be chayav for a chasi shiur, for less than a shiur? Amar lehen Rabbi Akiva v'chi hechatzinu b'midaber u'mevi korban shezeh midaber u'mevi korban. So he replies, he says, look, wherever do I see somebody who, by dint of speech, just saying something, can become chayav to bring a korban, that this one should also bring a korban. In other words, there is no other case. Shvuah is a case where if you say something and then you violate what you've said, you have to bring a korban. Otherwise, when do you bring a korban? When you do other maasim, right? If you eat something that's forbidden, if you have bi'ilah that's forbidden, if you all the range of things that the Torah gives, dibur, you don't have it. So where else do I bring a korban just for speaking? In other words, Rabbi Akiva wants to point out that the case of shvuah is unique. So I don't necessarily have to bring another case where if you eat less than a shiur that you're chayav, because I already understand that in the case of shvuah, I don't even have to do a ma'aseh. I don't have to do any physical act to be chayav on a shvuat bitui. Okay, we don't need to do the rest. Okay, so this is the machloket between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim regarding shvuat bitui in the case where you say, I'm not going to eat. Or a person says, I'm not going to eat. Rabbi Akiva says that you could be chayav for a chatzi shiur. And the stama, right? If you just say shvuah shelo ochal, we understand, according to the Chachamim, Yatur, That's a machlok, right? That's why they argue with Rabbi Akiva. So going back to our Gemara. So Reish Lakish says, so this Mishnah, which is a little bit further on in the parak, somebody makes a shua that I'm not going to eat, but then they ate nevela and treifa, he's chayav. So he says, the only way you can understand this, in other words, he's going to answer this Mishnah in a different way, but he'll answer it both according to Rabbi Akiva and according to the Chachamim. Says Eyatam Lotze El bin Mefaresh Chatzi Shiur v'Ali b'Derabanan. So the way you'll be chayav is according to the Rabbanan. So according to the Rabbanan, if you say stam shvua shelo ochal, you're not chayav on a Chatzi Shiur. So Reish Lakish says you can understand this according to the Rabbanan. But when he said the shvuah, he said shvuah shelo ochal afilu chatzi shiur, because then the Rabbanan will agree. In other words, if you go out of your way to say specifically that I'm not going to eat a chatzi shiur, and you include that in your shvuah, so then the Chachamim will say yes. Then you've violated your shvuah when you ate. And so at that point, let's think about this for a minute. Our question was, but not right. What was our question? Why should he be chayav when he eats treif? Is mushba ba'omed mehar Sinai. So Reish Lakish says it's in a case. He'll give two answers, but the first answer is it's a case where he said specifically, "I'm not going to eat a chatzi shiur." So why is he chayav? How does that answer the question in Mushba va'omed mehar Sinai?
Is it because that the original Shavua at Har Sinai assumed a shiur, and so assumed the shiur, and by explicitly saying that it's less a shiur, it's no longer a mushba v'omed.
Exactly. So because Reish Lakish holds chatzi shiur is mutar min haTorah. So when you stood at Sinai, you took a shua on all of the Torah, it didn't include eating less than a shiur of something you're not allowed to eat. So this is how he's saying. He says, "Eyatam lotzei el bin mefaresh chatzi shiur v'ali b'derabanan." So when he said shvuah shelo ochal, he must have said explicitly shvuah shelo ochal chatzi shiur. And now, according to the Rabbanan, he's not mushba va'omed mehar Sinai because chatzi shiur is not an isur Torah, and B, he will be chayav a korban shvuah because even though the whole Torah kula, or at least in all of the rest of the Torah, chatzi shiur is mutar min Torah, but here he explicitly forbade himself. So there, the din of shvuah takes over, and shvuah, because the whole point of making a shvuah is to limit yourself in some way that the Torah doesn't limit you. Right? If you say I'm not going to eat, or I will eat, or I'm going to throw a stone in the ocean, or I'm not going to throw a stone in the ocean, Torah has nothing to say about throwing stones in the ocean, right? So if you say I'm going to throw a stone in the ocean, or I'm not going to throw a stone in the ocean. So now you've limited yourself in something that the Torah doesn't limit you at all. So here also you can limit yourself l'gabei achila to something that the Torah doesn't limit you at all. The Torah doesn't, according to Reish Lakish, chatzi shiur mutar min Torah. So when you make the shvuah, you say shvua shelo ochal chatzi shiur, so the shvua is chal, the shvua holds, and you can be chayav if you break the shvua, even according to the Rabbanan, because you explicitly said, I'm not going to eat a chatzi shiur. And the fact that you ate treif, which is for which you're mushbah made mehar Sinai, but since it's a chatzi shiur, you weren't mushbah made mehar Sinai. So it did not forbid you from eating less than a shiur of treif. So that's how Reish Lakish answers that question. Now, bear in mind, we're still in the middle of our basic question about Reish Lakish, but let's go on. This is a tricky sugya. You have to hold a lot in your head here. So Reish Lakish says, oh, bistam, that is, it could also be that he just said stam shvua shelo ochal without adding specifically chatzi shiur. V'aliba de Rabbi Akiva, like we saw in the Mishnah. The Amar Adam oser atzmo b'chol shu. Because Rabbi Akiva holds that if you by in a shvua, when you say something stam, that includes even a kol shu. Okay, but either way, Reish Lakish is saying, I can learn this Mishnah and understand that this person is going to be chayav a korban shvua, and the way I'm going to understand the Mishnah is by explaining it that it's talking about chatzi shiur. Now remember, what was our question? Okay, bearing all of this in mind, our question was, we understand Reish Lakish holds that chatzi shiur is mutar min haTorah. And our question, the way the Gemara asked the question was, if it's true that chatzi shiur is mutar min haTorah, lo nichayev ale korban shvua. Then if you eat less than a shiur, after you said, if you said, I'm not going to eat, and you ate a chatzi shiur, you should not be chayav a korban shvua. So we still haven't answered that question. It's just this is laying the groundwork. Because according to right now, according to Reish Lakish understands this mission in such a way that when you ate a chatzi shiur, you were chayav a korban shvua. Right? Bein leRabbanan, bein leRabbi Akiva, he says, I can understand this Mishnah that when you eat a chatzi shiur, you'll be chayav a korban. So this is our question to Reish Lakish. But wait, if chatzi shiur is mutar min haTorah, why should you ever be chayav a korban shvua, a shvuat bitui on chatzi shiur? Michael Werner, I feel like I'm losing you. I'm sorry. I know. First of all, I know that you're tired. I also know it's a little tedious. There's a lot to hold here. So, at any time, if you don't understand, do not hesitate to get me to clarify better. It's a very tricky sugya. At this point, because we're all tired, and we're going to finish this all tonight, I want to go back and help to implant what we've learned so far in our heads. Let's go back to this, to the earlier part of the sugya. So Gemara starts off by asking, why does the Mishnah say asur? It should talk about it as in the sense of it being anush karet. So Rabbi Ela, Rabbi Yoma says, "Lo nitzricha ela chatzi shiur." So Rashi defines chatzi shiur. Begom pachot b'ktar ben hagasa, shehi shiur liyom kippurim, keditan matnitim. Right. So what's half a shiur? What's less than a whole shiur? Meaning, in the case of Yom Kippur, it would be less than Kotevet Hagasa. The Chilosh Shlim Shiura, and if you didn't fill out the whole shiur, didn't eat a whole shiur, karet leka, so there is no karet, isura ika, but there is an isur. There's still an isur. Rashi says stam isura. And understand from the Gemara means that there's still an Isur D'oraita, according to Rabbi Yochanan. But when the Gemara originally says, Lo mitzucha elo chatzi shiur, we haven't yet made that distinction between D'oraita and D'orabanan. So Rashi just says, Isur Ika. Hanich l'man damar chatzi shiur asur min Torah. So this answer that we've given, that the Isur here is talking about Chatzi Shiur, that's fine for the Manda Amur, who says Chatzi Shiur is Asur Min Torah. Chatzi Shiur, Rashi says, Klomar Pachot Min Shiur Asur Min Torah. That is, less than a shiur is still forbidden by the Torah. Commander Ata Darish Le Mikol Chelet. Later on in the Sugya, and we'll wait to get there, there's a source for this from a pasuk of Kol Chelet. The drashas be from Kol, that any forbidden fat. But Kol, there's going to mean any. And that's the Isur Torah. But Reish Lakish doesn't agree with that. And but Modeh Reish Lakish Asur Midurabana. She says, Umatnitin Nami Miduraban Kam. So Reish Lakish says, our Mishnah is Asur, and it means Asur Midurabanan. So at that point, both Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan can understand our Mishnah. But then we have this problem with Reish Lakish. Ihachi. Rashi says, Ihachi, if it's so, to the Reish Lakish Asur Miha Midurabanan. If according to Reish Lakish, it's nonetheless Asur Midurabanan to eat a Chatzi Shiur, Lo nichayev alei korban shvuah. We should not obligate somebody to korban shvuah on a Chatzi Shiur. And then Rashi gives example. Hanishba Hanishba shelo yochal Chatzi Shiur midavar asur ve'achal. Someone who swore that they will not eat even a Chatzi Shiur from something that's forbidden, like treif, and then he ate, lo nechayev korban shvuah pitui. He should not be chayav for having broken his shvuah. He shouldn't have to bring a korban shvuah pitui. The hakayam alon the Masechet Shavuot. Why? Because we learn in Masechet Shavuot, Nishba lekayem et hamitzvah, v'lo kiyem. If he swore to fulfill a mitzvah, and then he doesn't fulfill it, patur. He's patur from a korban shvuah. O nishba levatel v'lo bitel. He's also patur. If somebody says, I'm not going, like I swear I'm not going to put on tefillin, but then he does go ahead and put on tefillin, he's also patur. So how do we understand this question of, so in other words, at this point, this is the Gemara's question, which we understand now a little bit better. We want to know, when will we ever have a case where you can be chayav a korban shvua on a chatzi shiur. If you hold chatzi shiur is mutar min Torah, which is how Reish Lakish holds, how will you ever get a case where you can chayav a korban shvua on eating a chatzi shiur? So the Gemara says, why do we learn shvua shelo ochal v'yachana ve'elot u'treifot shkatzim u'masim chayav Rabbi Shimon ter? Rabbi Shimon is poter mikorban shvua. I mean, it's either you're chayav a korban shvua or you're patur mikorban shvua. The Havinan ba in the Gemara continues in the discussion. Amai chayav? Why, according to the Tana Kama, why is he chayav? Mushba v'omeid mehar sinaihu. Rashi says, Mushba v'omeidhu v'havele nishba l'kayem et mitzvah. Somebody who says, I make a shvua that I'm not going to eat plain, even if he would say, Rashi seems to have this in the previous Rashi. If somebody says, I'm not going to eat barim asurim, I'm not going to eat treif, and then he eats treif, he's chayav, but why should he be chayav? He was mushba v'omeid mehar Sinai. He was already mushba, and when he made the shvua that he's not going to eat treif, he was simply making a shvua to fulfill a mitzvah. And a shvua doesn't fall on another shvua. So the Gemara says, according to Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, the way I understand the mission is b'kolel dvarim mutarim im dvar asurim. When he made the shvua, he included both permitted and forbidden things. Rashi says, b'kolel shvua shelo ochal basar shkuta v'lo basar nevela. Somebody made a shvua and they said, I'm not going to eat neither kosher meat or non-kosher meat. He said it explicitly. Demigo de chayala ahira, since the shvua will fall, in other words, it will take hold of the part of the shvua that where he's forbidding something that he's allowed to eat. Chayala nami aisura. It's also going to take hold on the part that's asur, that where he says, I'm going to eat something that's asur. The Rabbi Shimon poter, Rabbi Shimon says he's still, even if he's kolel dvarim mutarim dvarim asurim, he's still patur from korban shvua. The letle isur kolel v'lo amrina migo, because Rabbi Shimon holds, he doesn't hold by the notion that you can include in an isur things that are mutar, or vice versa. In other words, here, the Rabbanan are going on an idea that the person who makes the shvua has effectively expanded the possible, what should have been the possible scope of his shvua. It should be that the only thing that he can swear about are things that are hard for him, because the things that are forbidden to him, he's already sworn about them at Sinai. But when he says, Shua shelo ochal lo basar vela, then he's made into one single shvua he's added to the basis of that shua, which is the dvarim mutarim. He's added on his kolel dvarim ha'asurim. But Rabbi Shimon holds you can't do that. Just hold as a concept, you can't do that. Yes?
So and Rabbi Shimon, oh, you answered the question. Rabbi Shimon says you can't do that. That was the question.
So Rabbi Shimon Poter, Rashi says, delayed le isur kolel. That is, literally, he doesn't have isur kolel. It means he doesn't hold by this concept of isur kolel. And because the Torah, that gets into a deeper discussion about what the conceptual difference between Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon is, but he holds you can do it. In other words, the Torah, the Torah only is going to apply here to, like, Shvuah will only apply to Dvarim Mutarim. And since there's no such thing as an Isur Kolel, Lo Amrin on Migo. So then I can't say Migo. Because the whole, the Migo is Mitoch, right? Since the Shvuah is Mitoch She, Migo is just Aramid from Mitoch. Because the Shvuah falls on Dvarim Mutarim, it's also going to fall on the Dvarim HaAsurim. So Rabbi Shimon says you can't get to Migo in this case, because you can't be Kolel in the Isur is not automatically Kolel. So that's how Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan hold. Reish Lakish holds differently. Reish Lakish Amar Eita Motzei. Rashi says Sheyeh Chayav Korban Shvuah Al Hanevela Im Achal Kezayit Shehu Mushba Alav Mehar Sinai Ela Ba'ochel Chatzi Shiur Sheino Mushba Alav Misinai Uv'shvuato Nesar Alav. So he says, you won't find a case that you'll be chayav korban shvuah for eating in the nevela. In this case, where you swore, I'm not going to eat in the nevela, and then you eat in the nevela. How can you be chayav? You won't find shehei chayav korban shvuah nevela imachal kazayit shu mushbala nehar Sinai. You won't find it in the case where he eats a kazayit Ela, you will find it ba'ochel chatzi shiur sheino mushba alav misinai uv'shvuato ne'asar alav. So what made it asur for him was not the fact that he was mushba mehar Sinai, because if that was the case, then, as everybody agrees, he should be patur from korban shvuah. Right, because you can't make a shua on a shua. So Reish Lakish says no, but the loophole is that he said shua shelo ochel nevela, and then he ate a chatzi shiur, because on that he wasn't mushba me'ar Sinai. And the only reason it's asur to him is because it's not the only reason it's asur to him. No, it is the only reason it's asur to him now. The only reason it's asur to him now is because he made a shvuah to not eat even a chatzi shiur. And when b'mefaresh, if you're talking about the Rabbanan, he said specifically shelo ocha afil chatzi shiur. Or and that's a lead Rabbanan. The Amri b'shvuah danishpa shelo ocha stam oser atzmo b'kishiur. Right, that's the mission that we saw, that Chachamim hold. If somebody says, "I'm not going to eat," with any further explication, then it means that the shvuah only is chal if he eats a shiur. But if he says specifically, I'm not going to eat a chatzi shiur, then the Rabbanan will say that the shvuah is chal on a chatzi shiur. Obistam. Or you can also understand the Mishnah in the case where he didn't say explicitly that I'm going to the Chatzi Shiur. But see, Lokuma, you could establish that the Mishnah is talking about where he didn't say explicitly. Mihu kishachal lo achal el Chatzi Shiur, she'no mushba alav misinai. You could understand the Mishnah in this case that again, he only said, I will not eat in the Vela, and he didn't say explicitly how much he would or wouldn't eat. So we know according to the Rabbanan, he'll be patur, right? If he eats a shiur, and even if he eats a chatzi shiur, because according to the Chachamim, bistam, the shvua only is chal when you eat a shiur. Or you could understand it's bistam, but it's according to Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva holds that bistam you're chayav even on chatzi shiur. Yaliv the Rabbi Akiva, the Amar, Rashi says, the Masechet Shavuot, Adam hanishba shelo ochal stam, oser atzmo b'chol shiur. Right? Somebody who says stam, I'm not going to eat, he has now made himself forbidden to eat even a tiny amount. The hachik tanan, because this is what we learned in the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah we just saw. Shua shelo ochal, v'achal kol shiur v'yikiv mechayev chachamim potrim. Hilkach, therefore, hadiktane chayav, ikarabanan svir le mokminan le'bemefaresh. So this Mishnah that says shua shelo ochal, so if it's bistam, and he doesn't say anything specific, so either we hold it's like the Rabbanan, but it means that we have to understand that it's not stam, that it's b'mefaresh. Or I could say it's like Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah goes like Rabbi Akiva, and it's a field b'stam, right? Meaning like a field b'stam. Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon says are altogether patur. Rabbi Shimon ta'ameh. Rabbi Shimon goes according to his regular shita. B'chol shehu nami mushba misinai. Rabbi Shimon holds that stama you're also mushba v'omeid mehar Sinai on a chatzi shiur. The time of Masechet Makot, Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol shehu l'makot lo amru kazayit el inyan korban. That if you eat a chatzi zayit, even if you eat a chatzi shiur, if you eat a kol shehu of something that's forbidden, you're chayav makot. You're chayav makot, which is an isur, which is makot is punishment to Rabbanan. Lo amru kazayit el inyan korban. The only reason the Chachamim gave us the shiur of kazayit is that if you ate a shiur, you have to bring a korban. After all this, now we're getting to the kasha. The chatzi shiur asur midurabanan. If it's true that Rabbi Reish Lakish holds that chatzi shiur is asur midurabanan, hechi moki laha ditani chayav ve'ochel chatzi shiur. So how can he understand a case where you violated your shvuah by eating a chatzi shiur and you'll be chayav korban shvuah? V'harei af alav mushba mishum lav delo tasur. Because even then you'll be chayav because of the isur of lo tasur. Lo tasur means, right, you're not allowed to deviate from divrei chachamim. This is how Rashi understands the kasha. This is, I'll summarize this best I can, and then we'll pick up from this next time. There's a lot to chew over here. The way what Rashi understands the kasha is right. The kasha that we asked was here. After Reish Lakish said Chatzi Shiur that he's modeh that Chatzi Shiur is asur midrabanan. So then we said, if that's true, he shouldn't be chayav a korban shvuah, right? If it's true that Reish Lakish holds that Chatzi Shiur is mutar min Torah and only asur midrabanan, he shouldn't be chayav a korban shvuah for it. So what do we see? Isvira le Reish Lakish. This is Rashi. Isvira le Reish Lakish the Chatzi Shiur asur midrabanan. If Reish Lakish holds, nonetheless, the Chatzi Shiur is asur midrabanan, hechi moki la laha ditani chayav bo'chel Chatzi Shiur. How can he understand the Mishnah where it says chayav, that it's talking about someone who ate a Chatzi Shiur? V'harei afalav mushpa mishum lav delo tasur. So mishum the Chatzi Shiur. Rashi is now introducing another isur that should come into play. There's an isur of lo tasur. Lo tasur tells me that you're not allowed to deviate midinim d'Rabbanan. In other words, it's asur. There's a kind of an inherent seeming paradox. We understand broadly that there are such things as isurim d'oraita and isurim d'Rabbanan. Why do we have to follow Isurei D'Rabbanan? The Torah doesn't, right? If the Torah doesn't tell us that let's say we can't do, so why do we have to listen to rabbis who tell us we can't do something that's not in the Torah? So the answer is there's actually Sur Torah that tells us that you have to listen to the rabbis, and that's Lo Tasur. You're not allowed to deviate, you're not allowed to go off to the side from something that rabbis tell you. So what it means is, in principle, every Isur d'Rabbanan is an Isur d'Oraita. If you're over on a d'Rabbanan, then you're, even though that doesn't forbid you, let's say, we'll take the case at hand, according to Reish Lakish, Chatzi Shiur is asur min Torah, but I'm sorry, it's mutar min Torah, but it's asur midrabanan. So if you eat a Chatzi Shiur of something that you're normally forbidden to eat a shiur of, you're not over d'oraita on that isur achila. You are over d'oraita on the isur of lo tasur. By the way, this opens a question which may have your mind or may not have. I don't know if you've come across this before. But if it's true that every time that you're over on an Yisur D'Rabbanan, over on an Yisur D'Oraita, so then why do we say that Safek D'Oraita is the Chumrah, but Safek D'Rabbanan is the Kula? Because you should say every Safek D'Rabbanan is also a Safek D'Oraita. So there are answers to that. And now that we've touched on this, next time, B'li Neder, I'll give you a little more background to this point. The quick answer is, according to some Rishonim, is because when the Rabbanan made their Gzeirot, they made them al smach zeh. They made them with that in mind, that if there's a safek about one of the rim, that they were mekil. They could include that in the concept of zera, but nonetheless, it's a question. Okay, I'm going to try to sum this. Just summarizes this Rashi. So, what Rashi is saying is, okay, I understand that according to Reish Lakish, Chatzi Shiur, let's say Lagabe Yom Kippurim is mutar min Torah, but it's asur midrabanan. And then, like we said, that seems to be a general rule, both for Rabbi Yochanan and for Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan holds Chatzi Shiur is asur min Torah in all applicable places, and Reish Lakish holds Chatzi Shiur is mutar min Torah in all applicable places. But he admits, Reish Lakish admits that Chatzi Shiur is asur midrabanan, also in all applicable places. So now I have a mission that says, someone says a shvua, says, I'm not going to eat neveirot, and then he eats neveirot. It says he's chayav. So the question is, how can he be chayav? So Reish Lakish says he can be chayav in the case where he said either explicitly, according to the Rabbanan, or even not explicitly according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm not going to eat a chatzi shiur. And so now what? Now, the objection of why he should be patur is that he's mushba v'omei mehar Sinai. How can he be chayav for eating treif, for making a shvua? He's not going to eat treif, and then he eats treif. How can he be chayav for that when he's already? How can he be chayav for the shvuat korban when he's already mushba v'omei mehar Sinai? So Reish Lakish says because he ate a chatzi shiur. And he didn't take a shvuat Sinai to not eat a chatzi shiur. So but then the ultimate question now is on Reish Lakish, that's all well and good, but he should still be patur. Yisvir leil Reish Lakish the chatzi shiur asur midrabanan hechi moki alaha detani chayav lochel chatzi shiur v'harei af alav mushba. He also took a shvuah at Sinai to not violate any isurei d'Rabbanan, and therefore what? When he said shvuah shelo ochal neveilot treifot, afilu kechatzi shiur atzei d'Rabbanan, and then he ate a chatzi shiur of neveilot treifot. So yes, it's true that he was mushva v'omei v'har Sinai not to eat treif, and so the shvuah shouldn't fall on him eating treif. But he was also mushba v'omei to follow all isurim d'Rabbanan, and therefore he should be patur from the korban shvuah. So we've painted Reish Lakish into a corner. We can't, at this moment, we don't find a place where Reish Lakish can hold that chatzi shiur is, on the one hand, mutar min Torah, but asur midrabanan. And to bring it back to the wider scope of where we started, the question that we're really dwelling on is, it all still goes back to our original question. When the Mishnah says Yom Kippurim achila b'shtiyah, why does it use the term asur? So we said it's easy for Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan holds it's asur midioraita. It's just not a chiyuv. Chatzi shiur is asur midioraita. The Mishnah is chatzi shiur. And so it's appropriate to use the word asur in the Mishnah. Our problem is with Reish Lakish, because he says chatzi shiur is mutar mina Torah. So he answers, or we answer for him that okay, but chatzi shiur is asur midrabanan, and therefore it's appropriate to use the term asur in the Mishnah. But now we've challenged this whole premise that Reish Lakish holds that chatzi shiur is asur midrabanan. And if Reish Lakish does hold that there's still an isur d'Rabbanan, you won't be able to understand this Mishnah that tells me that someone who makes a shua that he won't eat treif and then eat shiur should be chayav. He should be patur in all events, because on the one hand, he's going to be patur from the aspect of the shua of eating. He said, he made a shua, I'm not going to eat treif. He was already mushba omeid mehar Sinai to not eat treif. So therefore the shua won't be chal on that aspect of it. But if he goes ahead and eats a chatzi shiur, if he eats a chatzi shiur, that's a sur midrabanan. And he's mushba made Sinai to not eat a chatiur, because it's not that Moses was told you're not allowed to eat a chatzi shiur, but Moses was told that everybody has to follow isurim d'Rabbanan. They have to follow takanot and zerot d'Rabbanan. And so when he made the shua shelo achal chatzi shiur, and then he violated that, so he also simply violated a shua to not violate isurim d'Rabbanan. So he violated a shua that he already made at Sinai. I don't know how clear that is.
I think I got it.
Yeah, I think you
I
got it also.
think that I got it too through my fading in and out. But
Well, Michael, well, actually, for both of you, it's a very difficult to keep all of this together. We're just a lot of things to understand this. The bottom line is at this moment in the Gemara, we are challenging the premise that we're challenging Reish Lakish, saying that Chatzi Shiur is Asur Midrabanan. And if we can't hold the idea that Reish Lakish's idea that Chatzi Shiur is Asur Midrabanan, then Reish Lakish doesn't have a reading in our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah says, Purim Asur B'achila B'shtiyah. And now that doesn't, Reish Lakish can't explain what it means. Because if in fact Chatzi shiur is mutar mina Torah and it's not asur midrabanan, then it shouldn't say asur at all. It's talking about Chatzi shiur. And if it's talking about a shiur, it should have said chayav. That's where the Gemara is right now. Gemara wants to understand how ultimately this is the question. How does Reish Lakish read? How can he read our Mishnah? Even if he holds that Chatzi Shiur on Yom Kippur is Asur Midrabanan, so in the context of our Mishnah, that might make sense, but it's not going to make sense elsewhere in the case of Shvuah. And that's this whole thing we've been discussing, right? There's going to be a case of Shvuah where he makes a Shvuah about a Chatzi Shir of treif where he should not be chayav the korban shvuah when he eats a chatzi shir of treif after he made a shvuah not to eat a chatzi shir of treif, and therefore it's a challenge to the whole idea that chatzi shir is asur midrabanan according to Reish Lakish. So once again, if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, chatzi shir is asur min Torah, none of these questions are going to apply because it's simply asur. Chatzi shir is asur min Torah. So when the Mishnah here says Yom Kippurim asur ba'achila v'shtiyah, it means chatzi shir is asur min Torah even on Yom Kippur. Finished. According to Reish Lakish, he says asur means chatzi shir is asur midrabanan on Yom Kippur. But midiraita it's mutar. But now, having gone through this sugya, we understand, or hopefully we understand, or wants us to understand, that if you hold that chatzi shiur is asur midirabanan, it's not going to hold water in this case of shua. We're essentially disproving the contention that somebody could hold this shita that chatzi shir is asur midirabanan. If it's asur midiraita, it's fine. I can make sense of everything. But if it's asur midirabanan, it's not going to work. That's where we're up to. At this moment, what we've done is we have explained this question here. And next week, we'll see how the Gemara counters. After that, we'll do because I said this is a very tough sugya. If Michael Werner, Michael Schwartz, if you want to understand this, I urge you to listen. You could listen to my audio like a podcast if you listen to podcasts. That's why I put up the audio. Listen to it again. It's a lot to hold in one's head. We've brought in many different aspects here. Also, Bli Neder, I promised to explain this a little bit further, this sur of Lotasur. But this is, according to the way Rashi understands the sugya, this is a pivotal notion. You have to understand this idea that the Torah forbids you from deviating from Divrei Chachamim. And so therefore, even a Nisur D'Rabbanan carries with it the weight of a Nisur Torah for certain intents and purposes. Okay, Ad Kan.
Oh,
All right. See you next week.
yeah, good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.